I'm going to welcome you all to this special meeting on Wednesday night, and I really hope you'll enjoy it. Rudy Westervelt from E Club of World Peace is the one who starts the meeting. And it's an opportunity to see how another E Club operates and also to hear the speaker. And I'm just enthralled with this speaker.
To in a moment, so I've turned the recording on because I can't miss a second of this. This is a sensational night. So welcome everybody to the Rotary E Club of World Peace. We'll get to Cliff Guy here in a minute. We got Cliff squared. We have two Cliffs in the same room there tonight, which is kind of neat. So I know we've got certainly Cliff's on with us. Steve Klein, Shags. What's your name? Unmute yourself there.
Stephen Shagrin, but there are too many Stevens in the world.
Okay.
So I go by Shags.
Okay, great. Michael Henstra is with us. T. Marcus. Carrie, where are you from? You can unmute yourself there.
I'm Newburgh, Oregon, early birds.
All right, cool. Denise is with us from up here in the mountains, Twin Peaks area. Derek's on, Mike Caruso. Arnold, how you doing tonight?
Good, Rudy, thanks.
Dennis, Mr. Four-Way Test is with us. Mitty's on, Mighty Mitty. Mark Zober is wide and wake at 4:30 in the morning from Israel. Larry Hatch is on from District 5100. He's also trying to listen to the Dodgers win, I think so. And Dominique's with us from Haiti. Terry Pickering's from the desert. Today happens to be... I'm sure other people will come on our meeting here as we move along. As I introduce the speaker here, I'd appreciate you muting yourself so we don't get any feedback, so we get a real clear signal here tonight. And this is kind of a great experience. Today happens to be World Polio Day, and there have been events going on. There's been up in the Northwest here, up at RI. There was Rotary across Canada. They've been broadcasting since this morning from one side of Canada, from the East Coast to West Coast. And so there's been a variety of activities going on. I know there's been quite a bit of fundraising going on for polio eradication. And I know we all know that we're getting closer and closer to wiping this incredible disease off the map here. Al Jubitz just joined us. So we've got a pretty good coverage here. And so it's interesting. I'm not going to have myself talk anymore. Our speaker tonight is legendary, and certainly as a friend to each of us. He's a Rotarian and just an icon. He spent 40 years in higher education, half of it at UC Berkeley, the other half at University of Pacific Stockton. He's going on 60 years in Rotary. He started out as a Berkeley Club president. He was district governor of District 5160 in 1968, 69. I hate to say this, Cliff, but I graduated high school in 1968.
Good year.
Yeah. Charter president, University Hills Rotary Club. He was a director in 83 to 85, a vice president of Rotary International 84, 85. His presidency was 92, 93. His theme was Real Happiness is Helping Others. He was in the foundation and foundation chair through 93, 99. He's chaired of probably every committee in Rotary. And somebody said Mitty was going to try to break your record, but you've spoken to more Rotary clubs than anybody else in the world. His ABCs are Rotary. Obviously, if anybody hasn't read them yet, we need to get yourself a copy because it's really great. He's had a lifetime association with Boy Scouts in America and has recognized by them with many awards, and he's certainly one of the many awards he's had with Rotary is the Polio Plus Pioneer Award. He spoke at our District 5330 conference in 2016, and this happens to be his first time on an E-Club meeting. So maybe some of the other E-Clubs here can draft him to speak to their clubs. We had first dibs on him, so we're going to break him in tonight on our E-Club meeting. And without further ado, a dear friend of mine, and I'm sure everybody here on the call on this meeting tonight, Cliff Dochterman. Cliff,
Well,
welcome.
Rudy, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. It's a new experience to be wired up here for a speech. I generally, well, frankly, I've given up making speeches after all these years, after 60 years in Rotary. And when you have to call on a 91-year-old guy to give a Rotary speech, you're really scratching the barrel. But anyway, it's Rotary Week, Rotary Day, World Polio Day. And I thought the question you might try to respond to is simply this: how in the world did Rotary get involved in immunizing children against this horrible disease of polio? I don't see you anymore, but I suspect you can see me, but whatever it is. But let me just talk a little bit. I live in Moraga, California, which is on the east side of San Francisco Bay. Moraga is a little kind of a bedroom community. Moraga is a Spanish name which is freely translated means large mortgage. And anyway, that's the picture of our little town here. And we have a Rotary Club. It's a breakfast club that meets at noon here in Moraga. So it's a Rotary Club with a lot of older guys. I did go to Rotary this noon, so I'm getting an extra makeup here tonight. Let's think about how in the world did Rotary International get involved in one of the most significant humanitarian programs the world has ever seen. Let me get started and say, how did we get involved? Virtually everybody knew somebody that had polio back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. Polio was so rampant in the world. And polio vaccine, then in the early 1950s, was created by Dr. Jonas Salk and Dr. Albert Sabin. Well, how did Rotary get involved? It all started not by any great committee. Nobody had a big study. Nobody had a committee to organize and plan out how we were going to do it. We kind of backed into it. In 1979, Rotary International up to that time the projects were just club projects. Rotary clubs had projects in the community. And we had a president, Clem Renouf from Australia, that said, maybe Rotary ought to be doing things bigger than any Rotary club can do right in their own community. Maybe we could be doing larger things in the whole world. And so out of this was Clem appointing, as he was president of Rotary International, he asked 3 guys to serve on a committee. Not today, you never have a committee in Rotary of 3 people, but he asked 3 guys. One of them was from Arkansas. That was Ben Saltzman. He was a medical doctor, and the second one was from Tennessee, and his name was Webster Pendergrass, and the third one was a guy from California, and that was me. So the 3 of us met with the idea that we would try to design how could Rotary do something of significance in the world, bigger than any club or any district might even do. And so we got together, and the committee was called the 3H Committee: Health, Hunger, and Humanity. A doctor, a professor of agriculture, and another university administrator, which was myself. And we met and worked at different ideas, but there was a lot of objection. the Rotary world, some of the leaders, the past presidents, and even the general secretary thought we were going down the wrong road, that this was not what Rotary is. Rotary did things in their community, not in the world or in the nation. And so we said, if we're going to keep this program alive, we've got to have an immediate success story. So we were collecting money in 1979 to do something special for the 75th anniversary of Rotary. And we were asking Rotarians to send $10, $15 so we could build a little pot and do something. So we had some money, and we said, we've got to find a success story. So we put out a word to Rotary clubs, said, if you had $1 million, what would your club do with it? Well, you could imagine the kind of parties that were planned or the different kinds of things that people had in mind. But one of them came through, was from the Philippines. Two guys, one was Matt Caparis, who became president of Rotary International subsequently, and another guy, Benny Santos. And they says, we have the highest incidence of polio in the whole Pacific Rim. And if we could only buy the vaccine, we could organize everybody in the Philippines and we could immunize 6 million of our children against this horrible disease. And so that I said, that's it. If we can do that, we can do it right away. And maybe next year, when Rotary has new officers, they won't scrap the 3H program, and maybe we can keep it going. We need a success. And so that's what we did. The Rotary Board took some of that money that was collected for the 75th anniversary, and we made a grant to buy the vaccine, $700,000, the biggest grant up to that time Rotary had ever made. And so they made a grant to the Philippines, and in a 2 weeks' time, they immunized all 6 million children in the Philippines, and it was a huge success. And so other people said, maybe we could immunize in our community, in that community. When we went to the vaccine companies and said, we want 6 million doses, if you're in business, you mean 6 million of anything is a good order. And we said, we want 6 million doses of vaccine for the Philippines. And so we said, that's the way to go. And so the pharmaceutical company says, well, can you use some tetanus vaccine? If we're not using it, it'll go out of business or go out of value. And can you use some pertussis vaccine and other kinds of vaccines? And so a lot of people were giving us vaccines, and we were distributing different parts around the world. So that was really the first project of Rotary entering into something like polio vaccine. Nothing really happened then for a couple more years. And in 1981-82, the president of Rotary International was Stan McCaffrey. And Stan McCaffrey was from California, and he was a great friend of mine. And he asked me if I would be a chairman of a committee to really think into the future. It was the committee was talked about Rotarians of what would we do in the future. And so we got a group of people together, and we talked about things, and we made up a list of projects for the future of Rotary. And in that list was one of saying, maybe we could buy the vaccine for all the children in the world. I was chairman of this committee. We were pretty naive, and I really have said we were pretty dumb of knowing the reality of this situation. But we put down one of our goals for the future is to buy vaccine for all the children in the world. That was 1982. And the board said, oh, that's a good idea. But nothing happened. 82, 83, 1984. In 1984, Carlos Canseco became president of Rotary International. And Carlos was a physician from Mexico. And Carlos said, you know, we talked about buying this vaccine and doing something in polio immunization a few years ago. Maybe we ought to do it. And he said, I worked with Dr. Sabin a little bit, and I'm going to call him and have him come to Evanston and tell us how to get going. So Dr. Sabin, he was a tough old guy. He walked with a cane, and I remember he whapped the cane down on the table and says, you guys don't know what in the world you're talking about and how much you're involved. He said, just to get started, you'd have to have $100 million just to buy the first vaccines. And you'd have to immunize 500 million children just to get the program started. And I thought, this has got to be the dumbest thing I've ever thought of. And but we said, we already made the commitment, so we'll move ahead. So in 1985, we had appointed a committee to plan this plan and seeing if we could do what Dr. Sabin said. How could Rotary raise $100 million? And we actually set the goal for $110 million, just in case we needed money for the fundraising and other things, or if we fell short. And so we set the goal of $110 million. We hired for the first time. It's the largest thing that Rotary ever did in its whole history of trying to raise $100 million. It went on 86, 87, when the campaign was over in Philadelphia at the convention. They made a counting of how much money we had raised, and we had raised $240 million for the campaign. And everyone was joyful and everything. And then we said, now how do we get going? So we sent a delegation over to the World Health Organization. And they went in and said, we're Rotarians, and we're here to help eradicate polio in the world. And those guys says, get out of here. We've got all the world top professional doctors in the world with the World Health Organization. You guys are a bunch of old duffers that go to lunch, and we don't need you. And we said, but realize we have over 1 million members that we could mobilize people in every part of the world. And we have, by the way, $240 million in our pocket. The World Health says, come on in and join us. And that's how we got associated with the World Health Organization. And so that's when we started. We raised this money, and Rotarians started on one of the greatest projects that a non-governmental organization ever engaged. Rotarians began to mobilize the world, this country, that country, planning national days of immunization, organizing Rotarians and scouts and health workers and youth groups and organizations of all kinds to carry on national days of immunization. It was a difficult thing because in many parts of the world, refrigeration is almost unheard of, because you have to keep the vaccine cold from the time it's made in the pharmaceutical lab to the time that you give it to the child. We use the Salk, or the Sabin vaccine, because, as you may know the difference, the Sabin vaccine can be given to a child on their tongue or on a sugar cube or something. The Salk vaccine, equally effective, has to be given by a shot in the arm or the buttocks or wherever. And you just couldn't do that all over the world. People wouldn't accept. And plus the fact that a shot had to be given by somebody who was training. And a sugar cube or putting 2 drops on a child's tongue can be done by anybody. So that's why we use the Sabin vaccine. We had unbelievable days of immunization. I remember my wife and I attending the immunization in India. 135,000 children were immunized in one day. They had mobilized the entire country and everybody in the country. There were signs on the street, on the radio, on television, parades and everything, getting kids to come out and get the polio vaccine. I know going to Ethiopia, one of the poorest countries in the world, I remember we had this at the United Nations as a headquarter building in Addis Ababa. And in the morning, we went there for getting people together and talking about the process and everything. And the president of Ethiopia was there and speaking, and he was giving the first drops. And they had about, 30, 40 little kids with polio plus t-shirts that hung down around their knees somewhere. And these little kids were coming down the aisle, and the president of Ethiopia was putting the first drops on their tongue. And at the same time, over on the other side of the room was about 25 little kids, all in braces, wheelchairs, crutches, whatever. They tried to stand up. And they sang a song to the president of their country. It's too late for us, but don't let other children get polio. It was a touching kind of scene. And then we went out and immunized people into the walking through the mud or whatever is necessary in little villages all over Ethiopia, one of the poorest nations in the world. So many, many stories that we tell about one nation after another. Because when we started, polio could be found in about 125 nations of the world. And it was rampant in virtually all. There was estimated about 40,000 cases of polio in the world every year. And it was a tremendous disease. Well, we had one experience after another. I'll tell you a couple of them. We went to China, and China says, well, where will you get the vaccine? And they said, well, we have to buy it in Italy or France or Canada. None of it's made in the United States because they made it, and the company was sued so many times by the effective lawyers of the United States that they went virtually bankrupt. And so there's no polio vaccine made in the United States. And China says, we won't take from those Western countries. We said, well, we'll buy it from your pharmaceutical plant. And they said, we don't have a pharmaceutical plant in China. We said, we'll build one. And we allocated $10 million, hired a Dutch company that they would accept, and we built a building to make the polio vaccine in China. Soon as the ground was broken and the concrete was poured, the Chinese leaders said, now we understand you're serious. We'll take the polio from any place in the world, the vaccine from any place in the world. And that's what we did. There's never been an ounce of polio vaccine made in China, but every child in China has received the vaccine. Many, many stories like that. I remember one day when I was chairman of the Rotary Foundation, I had a call from the World Health Organization, and they said, we need your help right away. I said, what's the deal? They says, we have to go to the Sudan because the civil war in the Sudan agreed to stop for 4 days so we could go in and immunize the children. And I said, well, what's the problem? They said, we don't have one place in the world that we can get $400,000. I says, you can have it in 5 minutes from Rotary. And I allocate, the president or chairman of the Rotary Foundation has a little authority up to a certain amount that you can allocate. I think $500,000 without getting the board action. And I said, you can have it in 5 minutes to stop the war. Immunized all the children. 4 days later, started the war again. Said, why are you fighting? We're fighting for our children. It's so many experiences that we had. I remember, or I know now, I get a report every 2 weeks, or maybe it feels like it's even more often than that, from the headquarters, that we've immunized nearly 3 billion children in the world. And millions and millions of dollars have been put on. Remember I said when we started, 125 countries. Today, you can find polio only in 2 countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. And the report I received last week, I think, said that there was this year, less than 20 cases in the entire world of wild polio. So we're so close to coming. As I indicated, there were nearly 400,000 cases when we started in 125 countries in 1979. The goal is to eradicate polio by the end of this year. Then it takes 3 years to certify that a country is polio free. So even if we eradicate polio during this coming year of 2018, it would take 3 more years to certify, and we have to keep immunizing even the countries that have been certified as polio free. You have to keep immunizing, because with the travel of people around the world, it's so easy for polio to be passed on to a child in another part of the world. The goal is to eradicate it, and there's only one, as you know, one disease that's ever been eradicated in the world, and that's smallpox. And that took 75 years, and we've been working on this now for some 40 years from its earliest start. So that's pretty much the story of polio immunization. As I said at the outset, we had no big goal, no big committee, no big plan of action, no committee. We just backed into it to save a program called the 3H program, to enable clubs to do things bigger than we ever have done. And now you see, nobody even blinks an eye. But when the 3H program was first started, we had criticism from leaders all over the world that that isn't what Rotary does. And now most people think that is what Rotary does, is to work around the world to make the world a better place. And this is World Polio Day, and I'm very, very pleased to be able to tell a story that I had a small part in playing, but thousands and thousands of people have worked on the firing lines of helping people, helping them do things to immunize hundreds and hundreds of children. So I'm pleased that Rotary is one of the great, is part of the great humanitarian project that the world has ever seen, particularly by a non-governmental agency. So that's the story, and if there's a question, I'll try to answer.
So we got too much cheering there going on. So
That's my job in our club.
okay, good.
Applause.
So some of you are muted and some aren't. What I would like to do as we move forward here to have some organization to folks asking questions, you can either hit me up in the chat box or raise your hand. There's a little raise your hand thing, and we'll try to have some order to it so we don't step on each other. Cliff, that was a tremendous story, and certainly you've been an integral part of this since day one, and I think it just shows us all that a commitment, and it only takes a handful of people or one person to say, you know what, we're going to go do this, and put your heart and mind and soul with it, and you can get it done. And you just have been an inspiration to Rotary International. Go ahead.
Yeah. You want to go back to viewing the other way? Or?
Oh, this is fine.
No, I put him that way so we could see everybody here, Cliff.
I got a lot of pictures here.
Yeah, we got everybody on here. They can see you and they can see each other, so I can see the hands. So Derek Moore, if you unmute yourself, do you have a question?
Hi, Derek. We talked earlier.
Yes.
Go ahead. Nope.
Whoops.
There
Okay.
you go.
I was at the University District Club in Seattle on Friday, and Ezra Tashomi, who is the past president of that club and also a past district governor, had left. And unfortunately, I missed Ezra when I was there on Friday, but he is on his last trip to Ethiopia to eradicate polio in his home country. He's been over here for many, many years, and he's a fine young man, and they're hoping that they can wrap things up for Ethiopia. And as you said, it's a country that's impoverished and is appreciative of every effort that not only former expat Ethiopians can do, but to have Rotary as a benchmark for eradicating certain diseases, and polio is one of them.
You're certainly true. Ethiopia was one of the tougher areas to get to, and the reason we have to immunize, we got new kids coming along, new babies every year, and you got to have an opportunity to protect them. And so that's why the continuous work is being done in so many of the countries that have been declared polio free.
Right. Good job. Al Jubich, you can unmute yourself and ask a question, please.
Hey, Cliff, good to see you again. And thank you for your leadership. What you were able to do with 3 people and the World Health Organization, there's got to be a lesson for us peace-oriented folks in that thing. On your screen, I think is something like 35 people. And our dream is peace after polio. So it takes good partnering. And can you conceive of any organization for Rotary to partner with in the effort to eradicate violence on the planet?
Well, I wish I had an idea that I could say would be successful. There's so many places in the world that there's continuous uproars, continuous fighting, continuous civil wars. I remember one day I was in Africa. I'm talking to some African Rotarians, and I said, why so many of these wars? And you have civil wars right in your own different countries, people killing friends, killing people, relatives and everything. And he says, you can't understand that what brings this about. He says, here in Africa, we have so little. And when you see somebody that has something more than you reach out and want to take it away from them. And meeting, you're trying to do something for your family. You'd like to have what that family has. And he says, meeting basic human needs is the greatest mission for war than a mission for peace and to the eradication of these warring situations. He says, until we can really have occasion, we can meet some of the basic needs of just feeding a child, of providing medicine, of providing clean water, of providing some food. He says, peace can never exist. And I think this is something that perhaps we in Rotary can think of. None of us are, I remember I'll tell a little story. The day I was selected to be president of Rotary International, a guy says, a New York Times guy called me on the phone, and we talked a little bit about what Rotary is. And he says, well, I understand you're involved in peace efforts or something. I said, yes, we are. We try to do some things for peace and understanding in the world. He says, if that's the case, what are you going to do about the situation in the Middle East? The questions got harder after that. But I said, yes, we do. We are concerned about peace. But I says, Rotary there's a difference between the instruments of war and the instruments of peace. I says, Rotary doesn't have rockets and ships and all kinds of armies. We don't have battleships. We don't have tanks. Those are the weapons of war. Rotary tries to work with the instruments of peace: food, water, medicine, education. And I said, you have to understand that there are two sides of one is try to meet the needs in which warring is not necessary, but we also have to try to meet those needs if we ultimately eventually want to get rid of the other kind of warring situation. But I'm realistic to know that there are people in the world, you don't have to look very much further than in my opinion, a country like North Korea, whose ultimate goal is not to have any stability in the world, but to be an ego that is trying to capture some kind of control. And war is caused by control and by resources. Controlling resources is another thing. So the goal is great, and I hope that we can chip away at it and keep chipping away at it. But we also have to be realistic that no matter what you do, some of the leadership does not have the kind of sensibility and attraction to peace and understanding that we may have who live in a peaceful, relatively peaceful country today.
Yeah, super. Mark Zober, you can unmute yourself there. I think you got your hand up for a short question.
Yes. Thank you, Dochterman. It's an honor. And thank you for everything you've done for polio. I have some good news for you in the Middle East. We're working with Palestinians, Jordanians, and Israelis today on capacity building, peace building, capacity building. We need support from Rotary International. We need that $500,000 from the Rotary Foundation chair, Paul Netzel. We need to get things launched now. We have some structural barriers to promoting peace within Rotary itself. Do you have some suggestions for putting together a task force at Rotary International to look at the issue and to move things forward? We have the team. We have the Palestinians. We have the Jordanians. We have the Israelis ready to work. We need the support from Rotary International. What's your idea?
Well, I guess you have to, in the world of Rotary, these kind of programs are largely controlled by our board of directors. And my own opinion is that we need a lot more thoughtful thinking about who we select to be president of Rotary International.
Yes.
Or to be on the board of Rotary International. Just to make a reference back, we did our first polio immunization in 1979, but we didn't get a program in operation until 1984, 5, and 6. And then 87 is when we really finished our campaign. I don't want to say anything negative about the leadership in those 6 or 7 years, but we also have to recognize that these are leaders coming from all parts of the world, and they have many egos, they have many differences, they have many styles, they have many missions in their own mind of what they would like to continue. We would have never had the Polio Plus program if it wasn't for Carlos Canseco of Mexico City, because he saw it and said, we're going to go ahead and do something with it, and didn't take the negative sides. We can't do that. That's too big. That's too little. Let's do something or other. No, we have to try to talk about, and I think that some of the peace conferences and things that we have had are maybe making some headway, but there's been times where it would be hard to get a majority vote of anything the time of day within just because they're individuals. Some of them are there because of their ego or their desire or their whatever. Some are there because they love the organization and they want to help. So when you see these kind of selecting people for the nominating committee, take some interest all around the world. Has the person, how deeply has that person really understood what Rotary is all about? The fact that he might have been district governor or she might have been district governor last year is a good reference, but you got to take a lot more time to see this organization and to take the position of leadership. How do you get money right now to carry on the program? I think you have to get some individuals who want to take that on as their passion, that they are willing to keep working on it. Elect them to the board of directors of Rotary International. We have just as good a chance as anybody to elect one every 2 years from our whatever area of the world that you're living in now, because they can be elected. But find out what their passion is. Find out what depth of Rotary service have they really had. Why do they want to be on the board of directors? Why do they want to be the leader of Rotary International? And these are some real interesting points of view. I don't know how in the world we can get money out of the Rotary Foundation. You don't have enough time to tell a quick little story. Are you ready to close me off? And
No, we could go on for
I'll tell you a quick
10
little
more hours
story.
probably. So go ahead, Cliff.
A quick little story. As president of Rotary, one day I sat in the office and I got a letter. That was 1992, 93. The letter said, I am the district governor in Austria and the neighboring communities, and I am doing my best. I thought to be district governor, all you had to do is send some reports to Evanston, and the rest of your life you're a past district governor and you get free meals. But he says, there's a civil war going on in my district, Herzegovina and Bosnia. There's wars going on. And he said, we need everything. We got so many refugees coming out. And I said, he says, can you help us? And then he had a PS on the bottom of his letter. If you can't help, I'll understand. But please, Mr. President, do not appoint a committee. Well, I didn't appoint a committee. I got on a plane and went to Croatia and met the district governor. And we looked at the refugees, thousands of people pouring out of Bosnia and living in refugee camps. I think we went to 34 refugee camps along the border. Well, each camp had maybe 2,000 or 3,000 people in them, living on whatever they had. And they're all old people, like those of my friends here that live in this senior center that I live in. Old people and young children. All the middle-aged people are out fighting themselves. And the newspaper cornered me and they said, who are you people helping? The Bosnians or the Muslims or the Croatians, or who are you helping? I says, I don't know. I said, when you see a little child that's hungry and is cold, doesn't have any shoes, you don't ask them what their religion is or what's their nationality. You help them because they're kids, and that's what we do. Anyway, I put the word out, we need help. And in 8 days, we had, in 1 week, we had $8 million pouring in. Well, before I'd left for the going to Croatia, I went into the Rotary Foundation office and says, we got to do something in Bosnia. How can we get some money for the Rotary Foundation? And they said, well, you know the plan. It's got to be in the file for 3 years. And it's we got our programs. They have to be scholarships or they have to be this kind of grants or something. I says, in 3 years, there won't be any of these people. And so I said, well, okay, if that's the way the foundation works. I said, I'll find another way. So when I got over to Croatia, I said, now if I ask people to just send some money over here, how will I be assured that it'll be spent correctly and not just be wasted or go to some warlord or something? And he says, wait till after lunch. After lunch, we were, and this time we were over in Austria by then, and they brought in 3 Rotarians. These were all bankers from Rotary clubs. And if you went to Central Casting and got the steely-eyed banker in the world, these guys, big stiff collars and everything, you can count on us. They counted on every dime of that $8 million that came in. And we just went around the foundation to achieve the objective. Now, that's not what a Rotarian, is this the truth and is this that kind of stuff? It was an effective way to do something on the spot. And the Rotary Foundation is wonderful. I chaired it. I sat as a trustee for 6 years. but sometimes we've got to find ways to achieve our objectives and not just be bound by rules and regulations that prevent us from achieving our objectives. Now, this doesn't sound like I'm a Rotarian. I didn't join Kiwanis this morning, but I'm just being as frank as I can to say that sometimes that just doesn't work through the Rotary Foundation. And most of you don't know, no, most Rotarians in the whole world don't know that when we set up the Rotary, the polio program, when we had this fundraiser, I said in 1985, 86, 87, when we started the fundraising, the Rotary Foundation said, we don't do that. We don't collect money like that. We put money 3 years in a fund and it's just our own programs. Polio Plus is not one of our programs. And so we said, okay. We set up an entirely new office in town Evanston, not outside the Rotary office. And it was in a warehouse or a tall building, as tall as they get in Evanston. But it was just an office building. And the Rotary Foundation had zero interest in the Polio Plus program. And then after I went into that office one day and there was money coming in shoe boxes, money coming in so fast they were trying to write on backs of envelopes and everything. The money was, people knew the problem and was going to help do something about it. But the foundation wouldn't touch it. And we think now it's the greatest program the foundation has ever had. But I knew it when it was not. It was kind of a offshoot. And so the legal people then stepped in and said, you guys can't collect money in the name of Rotary. It has to go through the Rotary Foundation. And then, so they went to the Rotary Foundation and says, you guys have got to get interested in Polio Plus because the money's coming in and you're the only ones that can accept the money. So that's a little sidelight. Not too many people know, and certainly a chairman of the Rotary Foundation would never tell you that.
That's a good one.
Dr. Dochterman, just quickly, thank you for that answer. I have an invitation for you. You're invited to Israel. You'll meet some great Rotarians from Palestine, Jordan, and Israel, and give you an opportunity within or without for Rotary to promote peace in the Middle East.
Can I get there in my wheelchair?
Yeah, so.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, at my old age, I just, I appreciate your invitation. And there was a day when I would say, you're taken, I'll take it. But I don't get around anymore.
If you want to designate somebody, that would be great.
So I
appreciate the mission. I appreciate what you're doing. And
Thank
it's
you.
the kind of thing that we Rotarians, everything in the world can't be put into the same boxes. You got to have some extra boxes that we can do things that are that will achieve objectives that are beyond. If we waited for a committee to organize the Polio Plus program, we would have never had it done. And so we just went ahead, as I said, we told the foundation, tough, if you don't want to take the money, we'll collect it and put it in our own bank account. And that's what we did until the Eagles got in touch with it.
I got a couple more questions here, Cliff. One is Dominique from down in Haiti said their big issue right now is diphtheria. How do we get vaccines down there to help them out with that?
Well, I guess I don't really know, but we did get a lot of I think that you should talk with the Polio Plus program, or they should, and see if the contact being made with pharmaceuticals where we're buying the vaccine for polio, that they could donate some diphtheria vaccine. That may be a way. That's why you may not be fully aware. Where does UNICEF fit into the picture? UNICEF, the reason we are partners with World Health, with UNICEF, Centers for Disease Control, and now the other people that joined in, the
Gates Foundation.
Yeah, the great foundation support of the Gates people. The what we were doing at the outset is that we were buying the vaccine. UNICEF is the one that buys the vaccine. We give the money through UNICEF. UNICEF buys the vaccine and sees that it's on hand when they have a national day of immunization. So that's the role that UNICEF plays. And so they may be doing all the negotiating, but there may be a role that she could do something for Haiti for the vaccine of diphtheria.
Oh, super.
Shags, people have often asked, what's the next program after polio?
Right.
I don't know what it'll be, but the unique thing about polio was virtually everybody who knew somebody had polio in their family, in their school, in their community, somebody. And everybody knew something about polio. This is why so many of the other disease groups that know the dangers and the horrible conditions of other kinds of diseases are so they can't quite understand why Rotary couldn't undertake their program. But you don't have the universality that we had in polio. There was 125 countries, even besides the ones that had already become polio free when we started that out. It was universally known. If you were in North Dakota and started talking about malaria, they would probably say, how do you spell it? But it's just a matter of being aware. And certain diseases, certain conditions are things that have universal appeal. I've often said, to me, the greatest role that Rotary might play in the world after polio would be the education of girl children in parts of the world, because it's probably the greatest need that we have, because the girls are ones that set the pace for the world. And we ought to understand that role, that the lack of education, the lack of opportunity of girls in so many parts of the world today. But everybody has their own thoughts of please take on our issue. And
I think that's I think that's absolutely correct. Yeah, it's absolutely correct, Cliff.
I don't think there's any one single future project, diphtheria or whatever it might be, cancer. Something, it's got to have something that you can see some results quickly in order to keep Rotarians actively involved. If anybody told us there would be 30 years that we would be involved in polio, I would have said, never should we get involved. But we did, and we're grateful we did. And this
big hearts.
Such a great day. Any other thoughts or you might have?
I guess I know that several of us, since this is E-Club of World Peace, we're trying to figure out how do we tie these things together and basically help eliminate conflict in the world? And I think one of the things, Cliff, that you mentioned there was education of the girl child, because the mother is the family unit that really makes sure education happens and teaches the children and leads the family, and that's the core value that gets us to peace. And so maybe we should give a little more thought around that, and helps us raise the economic empowerment in those areas.
Yeah. Well, that's I've thought long time. Been on a lot of airplanes thinking about where are we. Well, I was first thinking, where am I going? But where is Rotary going to? And I've come to my personal conclusion that one of the greatest needs in the world is for universal education for girls, and because, as you're right, they are the keepers of the home. They're the guiders of children. They provide the stability in our society. And if we don't have them educated to be able to make decisions, to provide opportunities for them to have freedom to do things. When somebody told me the other day that, for the first time is it Saudi or someplace, that women can now drive a car. I think, how in the world do we live in a world like this when you make these kinds of decisions that women do not have the same quality education, preparation, importance in the world? So that's another speech without anything else.
We could sit here for all night long talking on this one. Derek, you got one more comment here, and then I think Al might have a comment.
Very quickly, I spent the month of May in India, and I attended a family wedding over there. And the comment was made that India will be the greatest nation in the world when they spend more money on a daughter's education than they do on her wedding.
Oh, yeah, that's a great comment, I think. Yeah. How is your time ready to close?
We're getting closer here, but we can go for a few more minutes. Yeah.
I'll tell you one quick story. As some of you know, I spent my life on a university campus, not trying to graduate. I was an administrator. But we had a girl from India, because you remind me of the story. The girl came here with an ambassadorial scholarship from the Rotary Foundation. And she was a charming young lady. And she said, we've had her in our home a number of occasions. And I got very well acquainted. Towards the end of the year, a couple of Rotarians says, have you talked to Lalita lately? I said, no, I haven't. I see her on the campus and wave hi or something. Says, no, she's trying to find somebody to sponsor her so she can stay in the United States. I said, well, I'll talk to her and have her come up my office. So she came up and she says, oh, I'm so glad to hear that you're going to help me find a sponsor to stay in the United States. I said, Lalita, I'm going to tell you something you're not wanting to hear. I'm not going to find a sponsor, nor will I encourage anybody else. I said, the Rotarians of India gave you an opportunity to come here. I'm glad you've had a wonderful year. You were studying to help handicapped children and one thing and another, and I'm glad you had a good experience. But now's the time to go back and help the people of India. And she started crying. She said, I thought you would help me. I said, no, you go back and help the people of India. Well, that would be almost the end of the story, except about 20 years later, I was over in India as president of Rotary, and we were dedicating a hospital, and it had a children's section to this hospital. And somebody said, oh, had several hundreds of people there, and as they do in India, flowers over everything and banners and flags and everything. So before the ceremony started, the chairman or the district governor, I guess it was, said, before we start, I'd like for you to meet the administrator of the hospital. And he says, I said, yes, I'd like to meet him. He says, no, it's not a him, it's a her. And we go over, and it's Lolita Pratep. And she had a little model of the Taj Mahal in silver, all wrapped up with a ribbon. And she put it in my hands, and she said, thank you so much for what you did for me that day 20 years ago when you told me to come and help the children of India. She said, that was what I needed to do, and that's what I am doing. And this time the tears came to my eyes because she had become one of the real leaders of child education and help for handicapped youngsters in India, in Bangalore. So sometimes you take a hard stand and you don't realize that maybe that's the best way, and maybe it's you can help in doing things, bringing peace and understanding in the world when that wasn't your real mission. You were just trying to say there's things for each of us to do.
Yeah.
So thank you all for listening to an old man ramble on.
No, it was a beautiful night, Cliff. I think I might have one more question for anyway. You just brought tears to my eyes, and Karen's over here crying next to me. It's
I wish you were all here. I have a big shoulder.
That's right. Well, we have the other Cliff Squared there. He can be on it.
Yeah.
Al, did you have another comment? One more comment, or?
Yeah, very short, Rudy. And I want to thank you for organizing these great meetings. And I think Cliff will be the first of maybe a president's series to speak to us about the future and the past. Cliff, I hope you accept more invitations to speak to us, and maybe I'd love to hear you talk about the United Nations and what role Rotary could have with the UN going forward. But that's for another day, and I want to thank you. I wish you good health.
Thanks, Al.
And thanks for the history lesson and for your leadership.
Thanks, Al. Thanks all of you very, very
If
much.
you like attending the E-clubs, I'll come down and set you up for our club.
Well, I don't know. I'd have to have Cliff come over again.
No, I'll come over. I'll come with my computer. We're all set.
Okay. Well, thank you all.
I think, Cliff, we have Karen wants to say something to you or ask you something.
Okay, this is in reference to peace as the next key
After
project.
polio. Yeah.
Peace after polio. All of the different things that we do in the avenues of focus that's what you were talking about, that we have to make sure that everybody is fed and there's nobody who's hungry, there's nobody who is uneducated, et cetera, et cetera. So even if peace after polio isn't really the name of the project, it's still inclusive of the areas of focus, which brings us to peace.
I hope so. I think that that's a very real thing, that we don't have the weapons to bring about peace by carrying on wars, but we have to work through the instruments of peace rather than the instruments of war. So thanks to all of you so much for your kindness and listening to an old man ramble on about history. I've often said, people says, is that the true story of Polio Plus? And my answer is, history is made by those who tell it. And you think about that a bit. Anyway, thank you all for listening to this bit of, I hope, was realistic history. And God bless you all for what you're doing.
No, God bless you, Cliff.
Thank you.
You are a wealth of information and history for us, and you're just, I can't thank you enough. We right here had said there were 3 Rotary heroes: Paul Harris, Herbert Taylor, Cliff Dochterman. Those are the top 3. And God bless you, Cliff. Stay in good health, my friend.
I was a brand new Rotarian district governor going to my assembly, and I sat down. They were an empty table. I didn't know anybody there, but I sat down at this table, and this guy, I wondered who in the heck he is, what district he came from. And we talked a little bit, and he said, well, my name is Herb Taylor. I developed the 4-way test. And I treasure that conversation we had that night. But Rotary is filled with people. We all have our own wishes, desires, but I think we all have to say thank you for someone who invited us to join Rotary. And God bless all of you.
Yeah. Thank you, Cliff. And good night, everybody.
Good night.
And that's it. Thank you for staying around.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Next week, I don't want to delay now, but next week I have a lot of questions and comments on what has been said. Very interesting, excellent, but I have a lot of questions and comments.
Don't you wish you'd been part of it in real life?
Yeah, I know. I would have told him few things about Ethiopia, because I have sent you. I sent you some information that maybe he didn't get yet.
How long ago was that recorded?
Last October, World Polio.
Thank you.
23rd.
That was one of my questions, you see, because he is really, he's excellent, nothing to take away, but he said, like, he was going for the last one, you know, the PDG, the Toshome Ezra, the guy who was saying about the Ethiopian need. But no, we're going, even this year, they're going October, the last week of October. They've been going every year since. They never stopped.
Oh, is that
so I'll tell you.
fantastic?
Yeah, there are a few new things, you know, that gets to be updated, but it's excellent.
Super.
So that was thank you, President. That was one of my questions. I thought it was done many years ago, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, good. So listen, because we are late, it went a little bit longer than I expected because I was a bit slow getting started. I don't know what happened, but I hope you were able to see it all with good bandwidth and everything else. I think it was worthwhile. I just love Cliff Dochterman. He's
amazing.
He is an amazing guy, and he's at not a nursing home or a retirement home, a seniors residence. So I love that. Thank you so much. I will get this up at whenever it's recorded properly.